I yelled at my controlling boyfriend when he asked if I needed help after seeing me try to use a drill. I said no, I don't need a man. Then I tried it myself, had an accident, and now I'm in the hospital. It's all his fault for not insisting on helping. It all started with a bookshelf, a simple pine bookshelf, one of those that come in a flat box and smell like a sawmill and promises of organization. For me, however, it was not just a piece of furniture, it was a manifesto. It had been in its box for weeks, leaning against the living room wall like a silent accusation. Every time I passed it, I felt a pang of something that resembled procrastination, but was deep down a kind of strategic fear. I knew that assembling it would be a project, and in our house projects were Gabriel's territory. He was the one with the tools, the one who read manuals without frowning, the one who turned the chaos of screws and slats into something functional and straight. And I was sick of it. Gabriel is not a monster, not in the obvious way. His oppression is more subtle, like a damp blanket. It manifests in gestures that to an untrained eye would seem kind. He brings me coffee in the morning, but always saying, "So you can start the day with energy," as if I were some kind of diesel engine that needs its fuel to start. When I cook, he always shows up to taste the seasoning, as if my palate were not reliable enough. They're small erosions of my autonomy, thousands of tiny acts of condescension disguised as care. He calls that love, but I know what it really is: a constant reminder that he sees himself as the strong and confident pillar and me as the adorable but chaotic creature who needs his guidance. I remember perfectly the last time he assembled something. It was a computer desk. He did it in less than an hour with an almost insulting efficiency. I was next to him trying to help, and he smiled at me with that patience he reserves for children and puppies. "Careful, darling. That piece goes upside down," he would say. "Oh, let me have that, it's heavy." I felt smaller and smaller, more useless, relegated to the role of cheerleader, while he demonstrated his masculinity with an Allen key that afternoon. While admiring the perfectly stable table, I didn't feel gratitude. I felt anger, a cold, silent anger. I swore that next time would be different. So that afternoon, with the golden light coming through the window, I decided it was the day of the bookshelf, the day to claim my space, not only on the wall, but in the dynamics of this relationship. Gabriel was in his studio, in one of his endless video call meetings. It was the perfect opportunity. I dragged the box to the center of the living room and opened it with a box cutter, with an almost ceremonial gesture. The pieces of wood, the bags of screws, the instruction manual with its cryptic drawings, everything spilled onto the floor. I looked at it all, took a deep breath, and felt a wave of power. This was mine. It wasn't about the books I was going to put on it or the decoration. It was about drilling the wall myself. It was about hearing the whir of the drill motor in my hands and knowing that it was me who was creating something, who was altering the physical space of our home without his permission or supervision. I wanted him to come out of his studio and find the bookshelf perfectly installed, a fait accompli, a monument to my ability. I wanted to see the surprise on his face, a surprise that would inevitably be tinged with that condescension of his, but that I would know was deep down a small defeat for his ego. The plan was simple, or so it seemed. Identify the pieces, mark the holes on the wall, drill, insert the wall plugs, screw. Simple. However, as I took the drill from its toolbox, I felt the first doubt. It was heavier than I remembered. It had a bunch of buttons and settings I didn't understand. The bookshelf manual didn't explain how to use a drill. It took for granted that this was common knowledge, knowledge that apparently I did not possess, but I pushed that doubt aside. It was just a tool, an object. I was not going to let a piece of plastic and metal intimidate me. I could handle this. I had to be able to. The struggle began with the drill bit. There were a dozen of them in a plastic case of all sizes, some for metal, some for wood, some for walls. The manual indicated an 8mm drill bit. I found one that seemed to be the right size and tried to fit it into the head of the drill, into that thing that opens and closes. It was called a chuck. I remembered it from some time I had watched him, but I couldn't tighten it enough. I turned the piece with my hand, but the drill bit remained loose, dancing. I felt the heat rise to my cheeks. It was ridiculous. I was being defeated by the first step, the most basic. I felt observed, although I knew I was alone. It was as if the ghost of Gabriel's self-sufficiency was laughing at me from a corner. It was then that he appeared. He came out of his studio, surely on a break from his meeting, and went to the kitchen. He stopped in the doorway that separated the kitchen from the living room and saw me. He saw me there on my knees on the floor, with the drill in one hand and the drill bit in the other, with a frown and a frustration that I'm sure was noticeable in every pore of my skin. He didn't say anything at first, just stood there observing the scene. The silence stretched on and every second was torture. I knew what he was thinking. He was thinking, look at her, how cute, trying to do grown-up things. The condescension emanated from him like the heat from a radiator. And then he said it with that soft, calm voice he uses when he thinks I'm about to break something. Do you need help, darling? Those 4 words were not a shout, they were not an order, but to me they sounded like thunder. They were the confirmation of everything I already knew. They were the materialization of his vision of me, an incapable woman, a child playing with daddy's tools. I felt a wave of fury so intense that for a moment I saw everything in red. It was the most insulting question he could have asked me at that precise moment. It was not an offer of help, it was a sentence. I can't do it alone, I snapped. My voice came out sharper and colder than I intended, but I didn't regret it. I lifted my chin and held his defiant gaze. I wanted him to see that his question had not weakened me, but quite the opposite. I wanted him to understand that his attempt to rescue me was pathetic and unnecessary. I could see a fleeting expression of surprise on his face, perhaps even pain, but I dismissed it as a simple act. He was probably disappointed that he couldn't rush to show how incredibly useful he is. He raised his hands in a gesture of surrender, a smile barely drawn on his lips that to me seemed like a mocking grimace. Okay, I'm in the studio if you need me, he said. And with that he turned around and went back to his cave. His retreat was worse than the question. It was a malicious conformity. It was him saying, okay, you win. Fail alone. I'll be here, waiting to pick up the pieces and tell you, I told you so. I was convinced. He didn't leave because he respected my independence. He left because he knew I couldn't and wanted to enjoy the show from the sidelines. With Gabriel out of my sight, frustration mixed with a rabid determination. Oh, yes, you think I can't, I thought, addressing the imaginary Gabriel who was laughing in my head. I looked at the drill again. The anger gave me a strange strength. I grabbed the chuck with all my might and turned it. There was a click and the drill bit was finally fixed. A small triumph. But the victory tasted bitter because I was no longer doing it for myself. Now I was doing it to prove him wrong. The project had ceased to be about the bookshelf and had become a personal battle against him. A battle I intended to win at any cost. With the drill bit secured and my heart pounding with a mixture of anger and adrenaline, I stood up. I held the drill, feeling its weight in a different way. It was no longer an intimidating object, it was a weapon in my silent war for respect. I took the tape measure and measured the wall, marking the points for the holes with a pencil. My hands were trembling slightly, but I told myself it was from the excitement, from the anticipation of triumph. I checked the marks 2-3 times. They had to be perfect. I couldn't afford the slightest mistake. Any failure would be ammunition for him. The next problem was the height. The bookshelf was going to be above the sofa and I couldn't reach it well. I looked around. The only option was a dining chair, one of those wooden chairs with a modern design and 4 thin, slightly slanted legs. For a fraction of a second, a small voice in my head whispered that it wasn't a good idea, that it was unstable, but I drowned it out immediately. It was just a chair. What could happen? Using the stepladder stored in the back of the cleaning closet would have been like admitting I needed help, that the project was bigger than me. The chair was the defiant option, the right option. I got on carefully, feeling the chair wobble a little under my weight. I stabilized myself with my feet apart to better distribute the balance. The drill in my hand now felt incredibly heavy. I rested the tip of the drill bit against the first pencil mark on the wall. I took a deep breath. The smell of dust and paint filled my lungs. I was about to do it. I was going to drill that wall. I was going to leave my mark. I imagined Gabriel's face. His fake smile of congratulations hiding his spite. That thought gave me the last push I needed. I pulled the trigger. The drill came to life with a deafening roar that startled me. The vibration shot up my arm, running through my whole body. I wasn't prepared for that brute force. The drill bit started to spin against the wall, kicking up a cloud of white plaster dust. The drill pushed back and I had to use all my body strength to keep it in place, all while trying not to lose my balance on the chair. It was much harder than Gabriel made it seem. He always handled it with one hand, effortlessly. What a phony. He must have been doing it just to humiliate me. And then it all happened in a chaotic and painful fraction of a second. The drill bit must have caught on something inside the wall, a piece of metal or a stone. The drill gave a violent jolt, a lash that tore the tool from my hands. Trying to recover it by pure instinct, I lost what little balance I had left. The chair tipped over to one side. I fell. I fell awkwardly with a choked cry. The drill, still spinning from inertia, fell with me. I don't know exactly how it happened, but in the fall the drill bit grazed my forearm. I felt a sharp, burning pain, completely different from the blow of the fall. I landed on the floor with a dull thud. For a moment there was only silence and the buzzing in my ears. Then came the pain, a throbbing pain in my ankle, a dull pain in my hip, and that horrible searing pain in my arm. I looked down and saw the blood. It was not a simple scratch, it was an ugly, deep cut, from which dark blood was oozing onto my skin and the wooden floor. Panic seized me, cold and paralyzing. I looked at the mess around me, the overturned chair, the drill on the floor, the half-finished hole in the wall, and the only thing I could think of was his name. Gabriel, I screamed, and my voice sounded both like a plea and an accusation. The trip to the emergency room was a silent torture. Gabriel drove with both hands firmly on the wheel, his jaw clenched. I was in the passenger seat, holding a kitchen towel against my arm that wouldn't stop bleeding. The towel, which was once a cheerful blue color with lemon patterns, was now almost black-soaked. Every time the car went over a bump, a groan of pain escaped me, and I noticed him tense up even more. We didn't talk. What could we say? I was too busy feeling the pain and humiliation, and he was probably rehearsing his "I told you so" speech. I could feel it in the air, thick and heavy with his silent judgment. The hospital waiting room smelled of disinfectant and fear. The fluorescent lights on the ceiling buzzed, making everything look paler and sadder. Gabriel took care of all the paperwork, speaking to the reception nurse in that calm and competent voice I hated so much at that moment. While he filled out forms, I sat in a plastic chair watching the people. Everyone there had their own drama, their own pain, but I felt that mine was the most unfair of all. I just wanted to hang a bookshelf. I just wanted to prove that I could. Why did it have to end like this? It was the world's fault, the drill's fault, the chair's fault, and above all, it was his fault. When they finally called me, Gabriel came in with me. A nurse cleaned my wound, and the sting was so intense that I had to bite my lip to keep from screaming. Then a doctor came, an older man with a tired face. He examined my arm and ankle, which by then had swollen up like a balloon. "We're going to need some stitches for that cut," he said, "and an X-ray for the ankle. It looks like there might be a fracture." The word fracture echoed in the small room. A fracture. This was no longer a simple household accident. This was serious. And with the seriousness of the situation, my anger solidified, becoming a cold, hard certainty. While I waited for the X-ray results, sitting on a gurney in a paper gown that was not warm at all, the tension between Gabriel and me reached its peak. He was standing next to me, saying nothing, just looking at my bandaged arm. His silence was an aggression. Why wasn't he saying anything? Why wasn't he apologizing? He knew I had no experience with those tools. He knew it was dangerous. He had seen me struggling. A man who truly loved me, a true partner, would not have just respected my stupid. He would have seen beyond my words. He would have understood my frustration and insisted on helping or at least supervising. The doctor came back with the results. As I feared, he said, hanging the X-rays on a light panel. "There's a clean fracture in the fibula. We're going to have to put a cast on it, and we'll need about 8 stitches in your arm." I heard his words as if they were coming from far away. A cast. Stitches. Weeks of recovery. Weeks of dependence. Weeks in which I would need help with everything. The irony was so cruel that it almost made me laugh. My entire effort to prove my independence had resulted in the total loss of it. And at that moment, all the frustration, pain, and humiliation found a single and clear culprit. I turned to Gabriel, who had a look of genuine concern on his face, but I no longer believed his act. In his concern, I only saw pity and a secret satisfaction. "This is your fault," I said. And my voice trembled, not from weakness, but from contained fury. He blinked confused. "What?" "It's your fault," I repeated louder this time. "You knew I couldn't. You saw I was having problems. If you really cared, you would have insisted. You left me alone on purpose so you could enjoy this, so you could come and rescue me after the disaster." The words came out in a torrent, poisonous and irrefutable. Gabriel's face fell. The concern was replaced by a disbelief so deep that it left him speechless. And in his silence, I saw my victory. I had made him responsible. Finally. The return home was worse than the trip. Now I had my left arm stitched and bandaged and a heavy plaster cast on my right leg, from below the knee to my toes. Gabriel helped me out of the car and up the stairs with crutches they had given me at the hospital. Every movement was clumsy, painful, and humiliating. He said nothing. His gestures were mechanical, efficient. He deposited me on the sofa as if I were a fragile package, and then stood in the middle of the living room not knowing what to do. The silence between us was an abyss. The scene of the disaster was still intact. The overturned chair, the scattered tools, the cloud of plaster dust on the floor and on the wall, that single half-finished hole like a scar. The unassembled bookshelf was still there, a mockery of my failed ambitions. It was a tangible reminder of everything that had gone wrong, of how my attempt at assertion had turned into a farce. Seeing it all made my stomach turn. I wanted to scream. I wanted to break something, but all I could do was lie still on the sofa, a prisoner of my own wounds. Gabriel finally broke the silence. "Do you need anything? Water? Something for the pain?" His voice was flat, emotionless. I looked at him and saw a stranger. The concerned and attentive man from the hospital was gone, replaced by this empty shell. My accusation had broken him, but in my mind I hadn't broken him. I had exposed him. His current coldness was proof that my theory was correct. He felt no remorse. He was just angry that I had found him out. He was angry that I had taken away his chance to be the magnanimous hero. "I don't need anything from you," I replied with a voice full of all the resentment I felt. He nodded slowly, as if expecting that answer. He went to the room and came back with a pillow and a blanket that he left at the other end of the sofa, as far away from me as possible. "I'll sleep here tonight," he said, "to be close in case something happens." How noble, what a martyr. Even in this situation, he couldn't stop playing his role of self-sacrificing protector. It wasn't for me, it was for him, so he could keep telling himself he was a good guy. Alone in the darkness of the living room, with the only sound of his controlled breathing from the other sofa, my mind began to work. To arrange the facts to fit the only narrative that allowed me to survive the humiliation. It wasn't my fault. How could it be? I just wanted to be self-sufficient. That's not a crime. The problem was his passivity. A true partner, a man who truly supports his partner, understands the complexities of communication. He would have known that my "no, I can do it alone" was not a rejection, but a test, a cry for help disguised as pride. It was an invitation for him to show me that my independence did not threaten him, to help me in a way that was not condescending. He failed the test. Instead of collaborating, he withdrew. Instead of offering his knowledge as an equal, he left me alone with my inexperience. His respect for my autonomy was actually the cruelest form of abandonment. He let me fall literally and figuratively. As I thought about all this, I felt a strange and comforting clarity. The pain in my arm and leg was still there, but the pain of guilt and shame began to fade, replaced by a righteous and pure indignation. I grabbed my phone with my good hand and opened Edit. I needed others to see it. I needed the world to know that I was not the clumsy one, I was the victim. The victim of an emotional negligence disguised as respect, and with my fingers typing furiously on the screen, I began to tell my truth. Popular comments from Reddit on the main story. Anonymous user 1. Ugh. You are the stupid one. Without a doubt. You explicitly told him you didn't want help. He respected your decision. He left, but told you where he would be if you changed your mind. He literally did everything a reasonable person would do. The accident was due to your recklessness for using an unstable chair and not knowing how to handle a tool. Blaming him is not only unfair, it's delusional. He couldn't read your mind, nor was he obligated to ignore your words to protect you from yourself. OP's response. Delusional is thinking that relationships work with literally what is said. There is something called emotional context. He saw me frustrated, struggling. A true partner would have understood the dynamic. He would have known that my pride was speaking. His respect was a passive-aggressive way of punishing me for not needing him. He let me crash so he could feel superior later. It's not about reading minds, it's about having a minimum of emotional intelligence. Anonymous user 2. This sounds like you have deeper issues with masculinity and with your boyfriend. You project onto each of his actions a malicious intention to oppress you. He brings you coffee and it's condescending. He offers you help and it's an attack on your autonomy. He doesn't help you and it's deliberate abandonment. Do you realize that, according to your logic, there is nothing he can do right? You have created a scenario where he always loses. The accident is a consequence of your own stubbornness, not his lack of insistence. OP's response. Deeper issues. Sure, the typical response when a woman points out the subtle paternalism we live with every day, what you call projection, I call recognizing a pattern. They are constant microaggressions that accumulate. It's easy for you, from the outside, to judge them as isolated acts, but when you live in that atmosphere, you know that nothing is accidental. The accident was just the moment when all that hidden dynamic exploded and became visible. He doesn't always lose. He would lose if I let his version of reality prevail. Anonymous user 3. I'm so sorry about your injuries. That must be horrible, but you have to be honest with yourself. The direct result of your action, I don't want help, was that he left you alone. The direct result of your action, using a drill without knowing how on an unstable chair, was the accident. He didn't push you, he didn't sabotage you, he simply didn't save you from your own decisions you made as an adult. Blaming him is a way of not taking responsibility for your own mistake, and that in the long run will hurt you more than the fracture. OP's response. Thanks for the compassion, but I don't need you to explain causality to me as if I were stupid. This is not a physics class, it's a relationship. In a relationship you're supposed to take care of each other, and taking care of someone sometimes means protecting them from their own pride. He saw me heading for a cliff, and instead of grabbing my arm, he shrugged and said, "Well, it's your decision." That's not respect, it's indifference. And indifference in a couple is the worst form of aggression. Update 1. A week has passed, a hellish week in which my world has shrunk to the size of the sofa and my mobility is limited to clumsy trips to the bathroom with crutches. And worst of all, I'm alone. Gabriel is gone. Not permanently, or so he says. 3 days ago, after 2 days of a glacial silence only broken by monosyllabic logistical questions. Have you eaten? Do you need the painkillers? He packed a bag. He told me he was going to his brother's house to give me space. Space. What a cowardly euphemism for, I can't handle the consequences of my actions. His departure, for me, was the final confirmation. He framed it as a considerate gesture, almost a sacrifice for my well-being. I think my presence right now stresses you out more than it helps you, he said without looking me in the eye. But I know how to read between the lines. He didn't leave to give me space, he left to give himself space, to escape from guilt, to not have to look me in the face and see the result of his negligence. It's the supreme act of cowardice, causing the disaster and then disappearing when it's time to clean up the rubble. I told him that leaving was cowardly, that he was abandoning me when I needed him most. He just shook his head and said, "There's nothing I can do right now that you won't interpret as an attack." And he left. My sister Laura came to help me. At first it was a relief. She brought me homemade food, helped me shower. The most humiliating experience of my life, with my leg wrapped in trash bags, and she listened to me rant against Gabriel. She nodded her head, compassionate, while I told her the story, my version of the story, the truth. I explained how Gabriel's offer of help was not sincere, how his withdrawal was a calculated trap. Laura listened to me with that worried big sister expression, but then she made the mistake of trying to reason with me. But Anna, she said, with that soft tone she uses when she thinks I'm being irrational, you told him you didn't want help. You were very clear. What was he supposed to do? Force you, take the drill out of your hands. That would have been paternalistic, don't you think? Her words hit me like a bucket of cold water. I couldn't believe she was saying that. My own sister was taking his side. She was using the same cold, heartless logic as the strangers on the internet. I explained with a patience I didn't feel that it wasn't about the literality of the words, but about the duty to care for the other. The conversation heated up. I accused her of not understanding anything, of having her brain completely washed by the patriarchy. Of course you defend him, I snapped, because for you a man who respects a woman's words while letting her get hurt is a hero. Don't you see that it's the same old oppression, but with better manners? Laura stood up frustrated. It's impossible to talk to you, Anna. You've built a story in your head where you're the perpetual victim, and everyone is against you. I'm not going to participate in this. And with that she picked up her things and left, leaving me even more alone than I was before. Now the silence in the apartment is total. My sister's departure hurt me more than Gabriel's. He was the enemy, but she was an ally. Her betrayal reinforces my conviction. It shows how insidious the system is. Even women are programmed to defend men, to blame other women for their own suffering. I'm alone. Yes, hurt and abandoned, but I'm also more right than ever. My physical pain is proof of Gabriel's negligence, and my loneliness is proof that the world prefers the comfort of a lie to the harshness of the truth that I represent. I am a martyr for my own cause, and that, in a strange and painful way, gives me strength to go on. Popular comments from Reddit on Update 1. Anonymous User 4. Your sister is a saint. She came to take care of you, listen to you, and when she tried to offer you a different and objective perspective, you attacked her and accused her of having her brain washed. You are isolating yourself. Gabriel left because he probably can't take the emotional abuse of walking on eggshells around you anymore. Your sister left because you don't want help. Do you want unconditional validation for your victim narrative? You are burning all your bridges. OP's response. What you call an objective perspective is the default patriarchal perspective. It's the one that always questions the woman's perception and validates the man's action or inaction. My sister didn't try to help me, she tried to correct me, which is very different. And Gabriel didn't leave because of emotional abuse. He left because it's easier to run away than to face the truth that his passivity caused me real harm. I don't burn bridges. I refuse to cross those that lead to a place where my voice doesn't matter. Anonymous User 5. He was abandoning me when I needed him most, but wasn't the whole initial situation because you insisted. The irony is incredible. You demand absolute independence, you aggressively reject help, and then, when the consequences of your actions hit you, you demand that the people you pushed away come to take care of you. In addition, that they do so by accepting a version of the facts in which they are the culprits. You have to choose. Either you are an independent adult responsible for your actions, or you are dependent and need care. You can't be both at the same time as it suits you. OP's response. It's not ironic, it's complex. And it seems that people have a hard time understanding complexity. Of course, I don't need him in the sense that I'm not useless. My need was emotional. I needed him to show that he was by my side, not above me. I needed him to be a partner, not a spectator. I rejected his condescending help, not his support as a partner. If you can't see the difference, then you don't understand anything about healthy relationships. My physical independence and my need for emotional support are not mutually exclusive. Anonymous User 6. Your boyfriend's phrase, "There's nothing I can do right now that you won't interpret as an attack," is the key to everything. He has realized that you have put him in a no-win trap. If he helps you, he's an oppressor. If he doesn't help you, he's negligent. If he stays, he stresses you out. If he leaves, he abandons you. You have created a labyrinth of contradictory rules designed so that he is always at fault. No wonder he left. He needs to protect his own mental health. OP's response. That phrase is not the key to everything. It's the perfect excuse of the manipulator. It's the classic tactic of turning the situation around to make the victim seem irrational. It's that you can't talk to you. It's that you take everything badly. I've heard it 1,000 times. It's a way of invalidating my feelings and avoiding taking responsibility. It's not a labyrinth. The rules are very simple. If you're a good partner, be nice. Don't treat your girlfriend like an idiot. He failed on all three. His mental health seems quite robust. The one with a broken leg and alone is me. Final update. 2 more weeks have passed. 2 weeks of silence, of physical therapy by video call, and of learning to do basic things with one hand. Yesterday, Gabriel wrote to me, I wanted to come and talk. My heart skipped a beat. A part of me, a small, stupid part that I refused to listen to, held a spark of hope. I thought he was coming to apologize, that the time apart had made him reflect, realize his mistake. I got ready, I dressed in decent clothes. For the first time in weeks, I combed my hair. I wanted him to see me strong, dignified, even in my state. When the doorbell rang, I took a deep breath, ready to receive the apology I so deserved. But he didn't come to apologize, he came to break up with me. He sat in the armchair opposite, keeping a safe distance, and said it with a calm that seemed to me the greatest of cruelties. He explained that he was done, that he couldn't take it anymore. I tried to interrupt him, to remind him of his guilt in all this, but he raised a hand. Please, Anna, just listen to me. I've spent the last few weeks thinking about everything, not just the accident, but everything. And I've realized that I failed you, but not in the way you think. He paused and I waited. I failed you because I tried to adapt to a game whose rules you constantly changed so that I could never win, he continued. His voice was calm, but full of a deep sadness. If I tried to help you with something, I was a condescending sexist who doubted your ability. If I gave you your space and respected your decisions, like the day of the drill, I was a passive-aggressive negligent who abandoned you to your fate. I listened to you, Anna. I respected your autonomy and you punished me for it. There's no way to win. Being with you is living in a constant state of anxiety, waiting to see what the next test will be that I will inevitably fail. His words were like small, precise, and painful daggers. I was about to explode, to scream at him that he was a manipulator, that he was twisting everything to save himself, but then he did something that took my breath away. He leaned towards the coffee table and left a white envelope. I found this on my desk. I bought it for you a month ago. I was going to give it to you for your birthday, but well, I think you should see it now. Having said that, he stood up, looked at me one last time with an expression I couldn't decipher, and left. He closed the door behind him, and the sound of the bolt was the most definitive I have ever heard in my life. I stared at the envelope for a long time. My hands were shaking as I picked it up. Inside there was no letter, it was a brochure and a gift voucher. The brochure was from a local workshop, a weekend course called DIY and Carpentry for Women. Empower yourself with your own hands. The voucher covered the full cost of the course. Behind the voucher, in Gabriel's handwriting, there was a small note. It said, so you can build everything you imagine. I have always admired your strength and determination. I wanted to give you the tools so that nothing holds you back. With all my love. Gee, the world stopped. Every word of that note, every detail of that gift, was a direct and brutal refutation of the entire narrative I had built. He did not want to keep me weak and dependent. He did not feel threatened by my strength. He admired it. He saw my desire to be self-sufficient, and instead of hindering it, he sought a constructive and respectful way to support it. He gave me knowledge, he gave me power, a real power, not the illusion of power that I sought in my stubbornness. The drill, the accident, my accusations, everything was reconfigured in my mind under this new and terrible light. I am sitting on the sofa, in the same place where it all began. I have a broken leg, a stitched arm, a broken heart, and this voucher in my hand. The truth is unbearable. He was not the oppressor, I was. I was the one who set traps, the one who demanded the impossible, the one who turned love into a battle. I have lost everything because of a pride so fragile that it could not accept a gesture of help. But to admit that is to admit that this pain, this loneliness, this humiliation is all my fault, and that is too heavy a burden. So I look at the voucher, I look at the note, and a last and desperate justification springs to my mind, the only one that can save me from the abyss of self-reflection. Even his gift was a way of pointing out my shortcomings, a more subtle form of control, a way of telling me that I wasn't good enough. In the end, he was never on my side. No one is. Popular comments from Reddit on the final update. Anonymous User 7. Wow, just wow, that final twist with the gift is devastating. He supported you in the most genuine and empowering way possible, and you turned him into a monster in your head. Your last paragraph is the saddest thing I have read in a long time. You are on the threshold of self-awareness, looking the truth directly in the face, and yet you choose to step back and take refuge in your martyr narrative. I really hope you seek professional help someday. You deserve it. OP's response. I don't need professional help, and it's not a narrative, it's my reality. The gift doesn't change the facts of that day. It doesn't change that he saw me in danger and decided to do nothing. The gift is a nice gesture, yes, but it comes too late and doesn't erase the abandonment. It's easy for you to idealize him now, but you weren't here. You don't know what his silence felt like. Anonymous User 8. Gabriel is my hero. Not for anything he did, but for what he finally did for himself. Get out of there. He set a limit, prioritized himself, and left an emotionally abusive relationship. The gift was not for you, Anna. It was the last piece of evidence he needed to be able to leave with a clear conscience, knowing that he was not the villain. He left the proof on the table and walked away. A lesson for everyone. Sometimes the only way to win is to stop playing. OP's response. Abusive. I'm the one with a fracture and stitches. I'm the one who's incapacitated. How can I be the abuser? It's incredible how people rush to defend a man who abandons his injured girlfriend. All he did was show that his comfort was more important than my well-being. He left the proof so he could sleep at night. It's the most selfish act I can think of. Anonymous User 9. That last sentence of yours is chilling. In the end, he was never on my side. No one is. It is the quintessence of victimhood. You have pushed away your boyfriend who loved and supported you. You have pushed away your sister who was trying to take care of you. And now you are pushing away the truth that was presented to you in an envelope. You are actively choosing loneliness and resentment because they are easier than admitting that you were catastrophically wrong. You are trapped in a prison that you yourself have built, and it seems you have just thrown away the key. OP's response. It's not a prison, it's a fortress. If being alone means not having to put up with anyone's condescension, then I prefer loneliness. If being the victim means being the only one who sees things as they really are, then I am proudly so. You call it making a mistake. I call it having principles. My only mistake was thinking that others would understand them. I will not make that mistake again.